We were talking about and doing like 1.5 speed. Like, turn it on.
You're like those radio ads that have to get that last 10 seconds of, and you may die.
Or small print car dealership.
Yeah.
And Kerry has gotten pretty good with
Yeah.
his at the planning commission.
We should have a race.
Call this council public hearing to order. Wednesday, December 1st. Time is 6:50 p.m. Topic is annexation of 58284 Old Portland Road, Port of Columbia County. I'll turn it over to our associate planner, Amy Dimshow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is another quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of the hearing is another request for annexation. The subject property is identified on County Assessor's map as lot 1001 on map 4 North 1 West 8D. The applicant is Port of Columbia County and the owner is the same. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the council wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? Does anyone from the audience wish to object of the ability of a counselor to make a fair decision? Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statement, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor, neutral, opposed, rebuttal, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to City Code and ORS 197-763, Section 5. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 1708-040, 1728-030, and 17112020. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulations, such as that found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to this issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Okay, getting into the report. This is another annexation owned by the Port of Columbia County. This is an odd one. It's along Old Portland Road, and the port actually filed their consent to annex in 2005. And I was looking back at old letters from Skip Baker back then and council, and it was part of a city initiated effort to reduce the number of islands, so that we always talk about the islands where there's areas not in the city surrounded by city limits. However, we brought it all the way to the council public hearing, and then they realized that the subject property wasn't contiguous to city limits. So I don't know how this was included in a city initiated effort to reduce islands if it wasn't contiguous with city limits. It's odd, but we still have the consent to annex file on record. They've signed it. I've got board approval minutes. I contacted the port again just to let them know, hey, we're processing this now, and they didn't have any problems. So we're moving forward. The reason that this is now contiguous to city limits is actually this little blue house, which you've probably driven by many times on Old Portland Road. So this was annexed in 2013. And if Matt, would you mind scrolling to the map? It's the last page there. Perfect. So that little blue house is, so you can see Old Portland Road. That little blue house is the area where it says city limits right next to the subject property. So that kind of irregular rectangle where it says city limits. Yeah, so that's the property where the blue house is located. That was annexed in 2013. And now you can see there's a small section abutting the property for tonight, which makes this contiguous, and we can pull it in. So we've sat on the consent to annex since 2005, waiting for the right moment to annex it in, and now here we are. So it's a 2-acre property. It doesn't have direct access to Old Portland Road, but there is a gate along Old Portland Road, just to the north of it, that goes through another county-owned property. So because there's contiguous ownership there, you know, they could easily either grant an access easement or something if they wanted to develop this 2-acre property. There's some photos in the staff report if you're curious what the property looks like too. There's-
It's not the whole entire property, you still have an island there. Is that correct, or no, it is?
No, there's definitely still city limits property here, but we don't have consent to annex on file for any of those other ones. So we're just pulling in the one that we've already got paperwork for. Yeah. So there is sanitary sewer along Old Portland Road, and water along Old Portland Road. So this is a good property, a candidate for industrial development. You can see here it's surrounded by some county property, and then the rest of it's just heavy industrial city limits property. So that makes the zoning pretty easy. Let me get there. City zoning is comparable to county zoning, so we're not concerned about any transportation related impacts. Our sewer system has capacity to support it. Our water system does as well. So we, you know, as with all annexations, we look at public facility capacity. It's not a concern. So this comp plan designation is currently unincorporated heavy industrial. Our only zoning option is heavy industrial, which makes sense given the surrounding zoning. So then we will also zone it, its comprehensive plan designation would also be heavy industrial. It would just be incorporated. So it's kind of a simple one. There's not a whole lot to talk about here. Just pulling in more property. Any questions?
Good enough. Okay, so we'll ask, is there anybody in favor of? Any? Go ahead and close this hearing.
Okay.